Kara had always prided herself on being a cautious driver. She didn't mind the long stretches of highway, the quiet roads that often seemed to go on forever. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the tires against the pavement, these were sounds that calmed her, that made her feel grounded in the routine of everyday life. It was a sunny afternoon when she left the small town she'd lived in for years, heading home after a routine trip to visit a friend. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow on the wet road, remnants of the earlier rainstorm still clinging to the asphalt. She wasn't speeding, nor was she distracted, just following the rules of the road like she always did. But today was different. There was an unease that tugged at her, a creeping sensation that she couldn't shake. It wasn't the kind of unease you get when something is visibly wrong, it was more like a whisper in her mind, a subtle warning that something wasn't quite right. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened for a moment, but she brushed it off. It was just another day. A normal drive, one she'd made 100 times before. Or so she thought. Out of nowhere, the car ahead of her slammed on its brakes. The screeching sound of rubber against road filled the air, and Kara barely had time to react. Her eyes widened in shock, her foot already pressing down on the brake, but it was too late. She swerved, her heart pounding as she tried to avoid the vehicle, but in doing so, she clipped the side of the car and sent herself spiraling into a ditch. The world spun for a moment, the noise of crunching metal and shattering glass filling her ears. She clutched the steering wheel, bracing herself for the impact. The car shuddered to a stop, and everything went eerily quiet. For a moment, Kara didn't move. She sat there, frozen, her heart racing, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The car was damaged, but she wasn't hurt. A few bruises, perhaps, from the seatbelt pressing into her body, but nothing serious. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to calm herself, to regain her bearings. She could do this. She could handle this. She wasn't badly injured. She was fine. Kara took a deep breath and reached for the door handle. It wouldn't open. She pulled again, harder this time, but the door was stuck, pressed against the side of the ditch. She cursed under her breath, her frustration rising. She wasn't about to sit here and panic. She climbed over the passenger seat, her fingers trembling as she yanked open the door on that side. The cool air hit her like a shock, but she didn't have time to focus on it. She needed to get out of the car. She stood, swaying slightly as the realization that she had just been in a car accident set in. Her car was a mess, crumpled in the ditch. The other vehicle, the one she had tried to avoid, had come to a stop further down the road, but there was no sign of the driver. No movement. She glanced around, her gaze scanning the empty highway. Where was everyone? Why was the road so quiet? A wave of confusion washed over her. She fumbled for her phone, hoping to call for help, but when she checked the screen, she saw it, no signal. This was strange. She was never in a dead zone here, especially not on this stretch of road. Her fingers clenched around the phone, the silence around her growing heavier, more oppressive. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at the wrecked car. It wasn't like she could do anything about it right now. The only thing she could do was get help. She could walk to the nearest exit, find a way back home. Her family would be worried, she thought. They would be waiting for her. So, without another thought, she started walking. As she made her way down the road, something felt off. The world around her seemed distant. The trees, the sky, they looked like they were there, but not fully. It was as if she were watching everything from a faraway place, from the outside looking in. The colors seemed muted, and the sounds of the wind rustling the branches felt oddly faint. Her steps, once confident, now felt heavier, as if the very earth beneath her feet was resisting her presence. She walked for what felt like miles, though she had no real sense of time. The highway stretched endlessly in front of her, but when she reached the exit, it didn't look like she remembered. It was an unfamiliar turn, one she couldn't recall. She ignored it, deciding that she was simply disoriented from the accident. When she reached her house, she noticed something else strange. The driveway was empty. She paused for a moment, confused. Her family's cars were usually parked there when she got home. But today, There was nothing. No car, no sign of life. She shook it off. They were probably out back or doing something else. She opened the door to her house, calling out, "Hey, I'm home. It's me, Kara," but there was no answer. The house was eerily silent. Her footsteps echoed through the empty halls as she moved further into the house. She entered the kitchen, expecting to find her husband, but it was empty. No one was there. Her heart began to race as she called out again, "Dave! Kids!" There was still no answer. She checked the living room, the bedrooms, everything was quiet. She felt a strange chill creeping over her, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. Where were they? She knew they had to be home. Her husband's car was parked out front when she passed by earlier. She went upstairs to check the children's rooms, starting with her daughter's room. When she opened the door, she froze. Her daughter was sitting on the bed, staring blankly at a photo album. Kara's breath caught in her throat as she moved closer, kneeling in front of her daughter. "Sweetheart, it's me," she said softly, her voice shaking. "It's Mom." But her daughter didn't blink. She didn't move. She didn't react at all. Kara's chest tightened with dread. Her daughter's eyes were wide open, but they were unseeing. Kara placed her hand on the child's shoulder, hoping for some recognition, but the little girl remained completely still, as if Kara weren't even there. "No," Kara whispered, her voice thick with panic. "No, no, no. What's going on?" She stumbled back, her mind racing. She turned to face the hallway mirror, hoping to see some semblance of normalcy. Something that would tell her that everything was okay. But when she looked into the mirror, her heart stopped. There was no reflection. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the glass, but her image was gone. The mirror reflected nothing but the empty hallway. Kara's breath quickened, her pulse racing in her ears as the realization hit her like a punch to the gut. There was nothing. No reflection, no presence. It was as if she had never existed. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of it all. The house, her family, it was all wrong. It was all so terribly wrong. She was there, but she was invisible to them. She was gone. She didn't belong to their world anymore. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her mouth moved, her throat strained, but there was nothing. No voice. No one to hear her. She reached out to her husband, but his body remained cold, stiff, as though he didn't even know she was there. Her eyes blurred with tears, but even they didn't seem to matter. She was fading, slipping further away from the world she had once known, and she didn't even know how. She had died in the wreck, and she hadn't even realized it. The world had moved on without her, and she couldn't find her way back. She was lost. Forgotten. A shadow in her own life.